welcome back to Highlander Heart, and this time we're going comic-y. Comic-y? No,
Yeah.
which
I don't know. We were animated last time or the time before that, and now we're,
This time we're going comic. I need to work on these segues. It's another facet of Highlander we knew we had to cover. And over the years, there's been a lot of varied kind of styles of comic book and things, even dating back to the 80s. Which we really want to talk about. Before we get there, though, it's super important for me to do something that I haven't done for a while and I should have done. I want to thank our Patreons. We have a Patreon at the moment, which really is just to help us do crazy little things, just like have a pro account here so that we can have our interviewers on and not have to cancel the meeting every 45 minutes. Helps us look professional and really makes our life a lot easier. So a huge thank you to Ronnie, Teresa, Jill, David, and Gerda. You guys are incredible. You make this possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, 100%. Thank you. And if you're interested in helping out as well and coming on Patreon, check us out. Just look behind the heart and you'll find us there. And we do our best to try and give you guys some sort of content in between. When we're not doing episodes, you get every episode early. If you have any ideas as a Patreon that things you'd like to see, then give us a shout and we will do our level best to make that happen. To say thank you. So thank you guys. Yeah. So here we go then. Comics. Let's talk about El Tony first, because that was a movie sort of comic book novelization, I suppose. And similarly, I think I'm always fascinated to, and I wish I knew the answer, to know at what point these became involved. You know, the artists became involved in the project. Was it from, had they seen a rough cut of the film? Had they seen, because certainly the characterization of in the El Tony comic, which was, as far as I'm aware, Italian, which was then what I'll be showing on screen now is a translated version by a guy called Clinton Rolls, who did this on his website, which is fantastic. So thank you, Clinton, for allowing us to, those who don't read Italian, to understand it all. But the characterization and the way that they look are very different to the way that they are in the movie. Most notably, Moran, who is sort of envisioned here as this like solid, like kind of unit of a man. Very different to the kind of bumbling kind of
right.
That was interesting, but it was great to see this. I mean, I don't think, were you aware of this before we kind of spoke about it?
No, I had no idea until you brought it up, and I'm like, wait, what? There was a comic adaptation of the movie? Really? And I'm kind of surprised because, well, maybe not so, since it was Italian. I'm not very well versed in, and you're right. It's weird. It's weird looking at it, because you're right. It's like, that's not who that looks like. No, that's what. Yeah.
And yes, to say, it's not even about the likeness. It's just about the fact that they don't resemble them at all in some instances, but in some they do.
Yeah.
You've got the Kurgan's armor depicted perfectly there. So I wonder whether there was perhaps they saw some of the photography. Maybe they saw some of David James's photography. Maybe they and then had the script and sort of formulated it. From that. Be really interested to find out a little bit more about that. But it was a great little find. It's nice to see something going back that far. Because prior to that, the only sort of 80s kind of comic instance I knew about were the newspaper strips, which I think there were maybe 5 of them. That they were, and I don't know if they were for American press or just for the UK.
I have no idea because again, this is another one I didn't know existed until we talked, and I'm like, man, Highlander comics, newspaper strips, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
And as it turns out, they're actually really cool. I mean, reading the text, I think above them, describing it, seems like it might have been like a daily or
yeah,
weekly lead up
yes,
to the movie. So, um, yeah, no, they're really good, except they're very, very, very dense with exposition. So they're kind of a hybrid advertisement,
yeah,
but also comic strip, which is weird. And it seems to kind of somehow work though, which is
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
So
and they look great as well, beautifully drawn.
yeah,
And here we have the likeness and everything because obviously it's a little bit closer to the release date, and and everything is. But yeah, sure, they had literally one long panel to fit as much in, and over a sort of a
yeah,
presumably as you say, like Monday to Friday, leading up to the Friday release at the cinema. They'd obviously just kind of had to get as much condense this 2 hour movie into 5 panels effectively, which is not
yes.
an easy task.
It has to have been a something from marketing or advertising tied to the movie though, because notably their likeness of Sean Connery is like dead on in a couple shots. And as we discussed earlier, he was kind of notorious about, you
Yeah,
can't use my likeness outside of the movie. So it's got to have been tied into marketing
yeah,
somehow.
yeah. No, I'm sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it was 100%. But and God, I would love to have a newspaper with that on it.
Yeah.
Would be amazing. But yeah, the strips as they are, as a set of 5, they are sort of around and about. If you look for them, you can find them. I know we know a few people have got them. Sadly, not me. But one
Yeah.
day, one day I'll add it to the collection.
One day, the Highlander library in your home. Yes.
I know. It's ever expanding. So, so from there, we're then shuttling way ahead to much more recent times,
Yes.
where a company called Dynamite took on the license, and that was it's kind of a nice surprise, I think, at the time. It wasn't. I remember hearing about it because I remember I emailed them almost immediately. I have loads of Highlander ideas, to which they were very nice, but a very repeat response of, well, that's very nice, but we've got a writers, but thank you. Like, okay,
Yeah. Fine. But they don't know Highlander like I do, I swear.
oh well, do it. But they did a great run. So we had. So how many issues were? I mean, there were set over arcs, weren't there? Were there 3 arcs?
Yeah, so for sequential numbering, there was a main series that had a 0 issue for Free
Yeah.
Comic Book Day, and then 12 issues after that, so 13
Mm.
essentially total. Um, and I think towards the end of that run, there was also the Way of the Sword mini
Yeah.
series from Dynamite. I forget how they overlap, but there was seemed to be a little bit of overlap.
Yeah.
And of course, as we'll talk about, miniseries, there was a couple issues that was great. So yeah, they did a lot and threw a lot at us, and it made me very excited that if we can't get regular films or a revival TV series or whatever, at least maybe we have something that can continue in comics. And unfortunately, that's all we got. But in a way, though, it's still pretty cool because there was some great storytelling in there that kind of encompassed all of Highlander, which was nice. So
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, what I got most out of it, I think, was elaborating on those stories that we already knew a little bit of, and
right,
then blowing them up. And for me, for the most part, that was Connor's relationship with Rachel. Um,
yes,
I love seeing them, and like in the 1950s, 1960s. I love seeing that relationship change from from that sort of just the daughter, there's the father daughter, a young daughter, and then she's growing up and she's starting to date and he's being protective, and
Yeah.
and I just love seeing all that stuff. It's it's such an important part, and I think people don't necessarily realize how important that is, I think, to the central core of the original film. And it's such a lovely, because it really says a lot about him, I think, in terms of wanting to be a sort of a father figure, and
Right.
he doesn't want to love in a conventional sense, but in a romantic sense, because he's
Right.
but he still has love to give, and he finds a way of doing that through sort of raising Rachel. So I love that about the comics, and just generally being able to sort of expand on things. So with the first arc, the first thing that struck me was that, oh, there are more immortals after he killed the Kurgan.
Right. Yeah.
So already you're getting a sense. So Duncan's not in the first arc, but you already understand that we are talking about that timeline, that kind of universe,
Yes.
where yes, he killed the Kurgan, but there are more. What were your kind of thoughts about that story? Maybe kind of, do you want to give us a little bit of a gist of?
Well, I mean, the first thing was I love the fact that it picks up essentially right after the first movie. I mean, it's basically the continuation of the first movie, as if they had shot like 2 parts and decided to release this 2 movies. It picks up right from there, and that I thought that was great. I love them bringing in the concept of the dark quickening from the TV series, which, absolutely. If he's, done in a guy like the Kurgan, who is not, there's nothing redeeming about the Kurgan ever. So that's got to be a lot of pent up evil and everything and memories to take in. So it completely makes sense. It's like, that there's got to be some kind, if you're going to have someone defeat a bad guy of that magnitude, it's good to have some kind of fallout or consequence of it to the hero. And the movie, there wasn't any. It's like, oh, here's your ticket, your golden ticket, you have everything now. This was like, well, not just yet, because there's a bit going on that you don't know about. So I really like that idea, and it kind of makes sense that the Kurgan would have lackeys, not that he would ever use other immortals to do his bidding like Kel did or anything. Kurgan doesn't care about that. He'd most likely meet them, kill them, and go on, right? But the fact that because in the movie, the Kurgan is this mythic figure to every immortal that we meet in the movie. It's like the Kurgan, oh no. So it's understandable that some other kind of he'd get groupies basically among the immortals. So that was kind of fun. Like, oh, the cult of Kurgan, why not? I thought it was a good, great in concept, well done, and looked good. So what'd you think of that first arc?
Yeah, no, I liked it. I really liked it. I mean, I think it was. I think they were always going to have the Kurgan in there, and I think that was kind of like something that was, it seems to be, he's a very iconic character in Highlander, and I think it's almost as if you couldn't have done Highlander without the Kurgan,
right?
Especially to start with, and it was nice to see him in a previous kind of, how he fitted in, how he slotted into those in-between bits in history, and the kind of role he took in that, in a way. And I like the idea of the lackeys and things. It kind of is almost harking back to kind of a Dark Knight Returns kind of thing, of these kind of like these obsessed acolytes, kind of brandish with this kind of tattoo of the Kurgan and all of that kind of thing. It was it was nice in that sense. And reading it in retrospect recently, I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a kind of old guard vibe, I thought, of the female immortal coming to Connor and asking him to come with her, and getting on a plane with this other guy. There's a little team formed, and they go off to Russia, and it's kind of like getting the gang back together to go and do this thing. It kind of felt, it kind of felt like that. So yeah, it was quite nice. It felt like a kind of a continuation of as you say, of the first movie. You know, isn't necessarily what I imagine a sequel to the original movie would be. Not really, but it's still a good story to it's kind of, you know, sort of elaborate on.
Well, it was funny though that you just mentioned about you know, seeing the Highlander or Kurgan interweaved in, because that was kind of always the thing about in the back of my head watching the first movie is we see, you know, the Kurgan basically kill him in 1536, and then they fight in the present day, but they always seemed way too familiar
Yeah,
with each other than those have been, you know, those being the only times they've, you know, it would, especially as much as the Kurgan was kind of as obsessed with him in the 1500s, you would think he would still try to seek him out, and probably the other way around too.
yeah.
So it's like there had to have been more encounters, and thankfully we get to see a taste of that in this. And it's like, oh, okay, so that kind of fleshed out the first movie a whole lot more too. So
Yeah.
that was kind of nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, you definitely get to see even more of that actually as the kind of the series or their license went on in some of the other stories. So the second arc was we kind of had a taste of where we are in terms of the Highlander, what universe we're in, effectively, may as well
Yeah.
say. So the second one kind of elaborated on that even more, and now we've got kind of you know, we've got Duncan's there,
Right. Yeah.
which I think, you know, everybody, you know, was probably waiting for. It was nice to kind of sort of see them together,
Yeah.
and sort of, you know, sample a little bit more of their dynamic, because it's not something that we've seen an awful lot of, and not, at least probably not as much as we'd like to, you know, with the
Yeah.
exception of the pilot for the series and Highlander Endgame, you know. So yeah, it's I thought that was interesting in and of that, and it was nice to see. It was nice to see Duncan again, and nice to sort of see him as a part of Connor's life, and, you know, a modern day, you know, and how that kind of interacted. What did you kind of think of that one?
Yeah, I like that. I thought that it was almost a better Duncan Connor story than Endgame.
Mm.
But you know, much like with the Kurgan, I mean, it's you know, it's obvious that Duncan and Connor have hung out a lot over the centuries. So you know, seeing them interact more in the comic, get more of a context in that. But like you said, you know, the last time prior to Endgame we saw them together, it was in the TV universe, and Connor was there, and you know, making the smart aleck comments to Tessa, and this time it kind of gets flipped, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, Duncan gets to interact with not only Brenda but Rachel too, which is kind of nice. And that's one of the other key things I think about this. The first two arcs I really like is Rachel had a more she had a much better representation, I think, than even the first movie. I mean, she wasn't just this thing for Connor to worry about. She acted decisively on her own. I mean, she had a lot to do with it, and it was really nice to see that. So, because it would make sense. I mean, if he's raised her, he's going to teach her. You know, I can see her being like 8 years old and like, why do I have to learn to fight with a sword? And why do I have to learn, you know, to defend myself and stuff like that? I'm bored. And it's like, yeah, you know, I have enemies, but I'm going to take care of you. And you need to know this stuff. So,
yeah,
um, so yeah, but yeah, seeing Duncan interact with the movie characters was kind of fun and interesting. So
yeah.
yeah, no, I quite liked it. I thought it was a good crossover and a good story, and gave both of them great things to do. Plus, we get Fitz, so
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that was kind of a surprise, but also something else that makes sense, right? So if you need an immortal you can trust with your clansman who's going through a dark quickening, yeah, Fitz is probably a safe bet. So
no,
yeah,
absolutely. And then, so for the last arc of that main run, we then shuttle forward in time,
Yeah.
beyond Highlander Endgame, which I kind of feels a bold move
Yeah.
on their part to do that, to go beyond Connor, and although he is present in
Yeah.
some ways,
Yes. Yes.
which we'll I guess we'll talk about in a minute, which is an interesting thing, but a sequel effectively, in a lot of ways to Highlander Endgame. I don't know. What were your thoughts on that one?
I liked it. I mean, much like the first two arcs where the Kurgan was present, in the mind of Connor, who has defeated him, and we get a great another battle between Connor and the Kurgan. But it does make sense that the same kind of thing would be present at least for a while in Duncan's head. I mean,
Yeah,
that they talk a lot about what the quickening means and what you gain from the immortal that you kill, but we don't ever see, other than like flirting with the dark quickenings in the series, we don't really see on screen what that really means. And it kind of makes sense, kind of like seems like it's kind of like the whole Trill thing in Star Trek, where when you get the symbiote and of the Trill, you get the memories of all their past posts. Well, it makes sense that if you take a quickening, you probably pretty much in the forefront get the memories and everything of the immortal that you just killed. But there's got to be whispers and things of of them, otherwise it kind of, what's the big deal with the quickening, right? So getting kind of to get to see that, and the representation of that was kind of fun, I thought.
No, definitely, it was it was interesting. It was kind of a interesting thing. I'm sure we talked about recently, and it came up somewhere else, about how sometimes there's been attempts to try and steer Highlander away from being too much like Star Wars in terms of the mystical kind of side of things. But there's a Connor Force ghost. There's no way around that, really.
Well, yeah, and I'm okay with that. I honestly, I mean, that's been kind of my time where I've kind of sighed and shook my head at fans that are like, they're. I keep reminding myself of the William Shatner Saturday Night Live sketch. In episode 3, you did a code on a safe on the wall, and we only saw the first 4 numbers. What was the 5th one? He's like, I have no idea. And so to be like, well, where do they pull their swords out from their coat, and how come they can sense when another one, what biological mechanism lets them sense, and all kind of stuff. And I'm like, I just took it was there from the beginning. It's a kind of magic. I mean, I don't. Sword and sorcery fantasy is what Highlander is, and I have no problem with introducing elements of, their swords are there when they need them. So I got really irritated in the series where they had like the episode where they focused on Duncan left his sword in his car. I'm like, he's not driving around with his sword sitting there on the seat of his car. Come on. I'm like, they're there when they need them. That's part of the magic, So Force Ghost Connor, totally believable. So. It speaks to the bond between Connor and Duncan.
No, absolutely.
So.
And I think, it's one of those things that, I think it's fine in and of that, I guess.
Okay. You weren't a fan of that part then.
It's cool. It's cool.
It's cool. It's okay. I can drink when I read it, and it'll be fine.
So after that main run, and I forget which way around this goes, but did Way of the Sword come first, or was it the Kurgan 2-parter?
I don't really know. I think they were around the same time. I think Way of the Sword kind of overlapped the end of the main series, and then also Kurgan around that same time. So
okay. So Way of the Sword is an interesting story, because for all intents and purposes, it's the main character is the Masamune.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
And how integral it's been to the bigger story of who's going to win the prize. Because there's a point at which Ramirez, and it just, I love the Ramirez stuff in this. This is
Yes.
for me. I generally love to know more about Ramirez. I think we talked about this a little bit when I think we've sort of spoken about the impact that Ramirez had and that kind of thing. And I think we didn't see enough of that. And I think I was possibly talking about that as well on the Blood of Kings podcast a little while ago. So it's great, always great to see more of that. And this, oh my God, this muscly torso to Ramirez.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, hey.
Facing off against the Kurgan was great. And you see Shikiko and things like that. And it goes back to that time. It's great. But he says at one point, this, were it not for this sword, I would have been defeated. And if that had happened, he wouldn't have got to Connor. And
Right.
So it was hugely, hugely important. And yeah, it's basically the story of the sword and how, is it a stretch? I don't know. But at some point, the Connor loses ownership of the sword and it goes to someone else, and it's and then he has to try and get it back and reclaim it and kind of, sort of.
Well, I think it's the Kurgan takes it from him at some point. The part that I understand is it goes from the Kurgan then to some art collector. So I find it hard. I find it a little hard to believe that the Kurgan would, if there's that much significance to the sword that the immortals wield, that he would just sell it or whatever because, maybe he needed the money or something. But it just seems like he would have found some other means to destroy it, unless again, it's a kind of magic that there's some sort of bond between the immortal and the sword that won't allow the sword to be destroyed unless in combat or once the immortal is dead. So
maybe maybe, who knows?
Or maybe he just chucked it over a cliff in a fit of anger and was discovered. But yeah, that part I was like, but but I do like placing the because throughout the series especially we've seen immortals, then they wield a particular type of bladed instrument, and even in flashbacks they have something, either that same thing or something similar. So it's obvious that there is much like holy ground being the place you don't fight, that there's some sort of semi-religious significance to particular parts of the immortal mythology. And I think swords are one of those, that this is it's an extension of me, and that's kind of Japanese culture with swords, that it's an extension of you, that's a part of you. And so I think that kind of goes into the immortals as well. So yeah, no, it's kind of nice seeing that whole history of that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Really cool. And you get to see a little bit of that as well from the Kurgan's point of view in the Kurgan two-parter.
Yeah, exactly.
Is a lovely exploration of his story, told kind of in a voice inside Connor's head, I guess. You've taken my head now, but I'll be with you forever. Here's how it all started. And there's a lot of great details in that, including the sword and how he got the sword, and the great battle he had with Ramirez that shattered his first one, and there's some great stuff there. And the writer Brandon Jerwa really took a lot of great inspiration from sort of all resources, including the novelization, which has a moment in it with Candy, I think, where there's more involved in that scene prior to the whatever else he gets up to. I'm not getting into that. But where he sees that she has scars and he shows it, and it's a lovely moment. It's a really nice character building moment, and I wish they could have put that in there, because it's something that stops him from being this cartoonish villain to a degree, and gives him a little bit more depth, and shows a little, maybe compassion's a bit strong, but as a moment of kind of seeing himself reflected in somebody else, and kind of feeling something, having some kind of
yeah,
emotion, some kind of compassion and stuff. So I love that Brandon found a way of putting that in there, albeit in a flashback, with another lady of the night. And all the other stuff, with like the fighting, fighting dogs in pits and stuff like that was great too. So what did you think of that, of the
yeah, I thought it was fantastic, because it was lovely reading it, because I did catch parts from the novelization, because there's much more in that obviously than the movie, but just trying to then research and find out all the disparate places that he got everything, and it's lovely because it doesn't contradict anything, and certainly in ways expands upon the Kurgan. And like you said, it doesn't, I would say that it doesn't make you feel bad for the Kurgan or sympathize with him in any way, but there's a lot in there that makes you go, well, I can see how he turned out the way he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, obviously some of that is his mindset and the lessons he took from some of the brutality and everything he saw. A different person might have come out of it differently, but he didn't. So it's like, so he, like you said, he's not just this cartoon one note, over the top villain. It's like, oh, well, that's why. So, and it's absolutely, definitely, I would think the definitive origin of the Kurgan. I wish they kind of promised with the banner of Highlander Origins that there would be more of those, and to see that kind of 2-part or 4-part kind of origin and delving into some, I mean, Fitzcairn is probably one that was ripe for that. Darius, any number of ones, even the ones we know well, like Mythos and Amanda, just getting that all into one place and making a story out of it would have been great to have seen that continue. But but we got the Kurgan one, and that it's just beautiful. It's
no,
really
absolutely. It's and I think that's the greatest kind of gift that I guess that the comics can give us is that more more about these characters that we know relatively little about, filling in those blanks in such a way that audio books can't do, or even novels can't do, because it's a visual medium, and you're getting to see and absorb these kind of moments is fantastic. So unfortunately Dynamite's kind of run ended there. It's the curse of Highlander, in that the fans are there and they're very passionate, but there probably aren't quite enough of them to make these things sustainable for long periods of time, which is a real shame. But that wasn't the end of the comic books. It was for a while. Then
it came back.
Highlander 3030. Now, a lot of people will remember Highlander 3030, but maybe not for the best of reasons. The first time this kind of came out, I remember people talking about this, and the predominant thing they were saying is like, why are they going to the future again? Have we not already done this in Highlander 2 that did not go well? Have we not kind of touched on this in Highlander Source, which did not go well? Why are we doing it again? But as with all things like this, my general thing is like, yes, but it's more Highlander, so it's not necessarily going to be a bad thing. It was curious to see, even at the very beginning, what they envisioned this to be, especially when you saw the lead character was somebody with long white hair, and when you then realized that was Duncan, and that the series would be set in 3030, on, and now I forget.
Europa.
Thank you, Europa. Yeah, the moon of Europa. Um, okay, all right. No, but genuinely, okay. Let's see where this is going. Like, this is, it's so far removed from anything that we've seen before. You know, it's almost like the distance actually helps it, and it could be its own thing. And this actually could be really interesting. And there were some nice covers. I mean, they're really good covers.
Oh yeah, yeah.
One of which was drawn by Rob Norton, who is a fantastic comic book artist. And then
Then we started seeing pictures of the interior.
Yeah. And what I'm gonna do is, because I feel bad. Look, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I am to some degree a artist, sub illustrator or whatever. So I would feel very bad being very negative about an artist's work, because it's not my place to say. You know, there are a gazillion artists out there with a ton more talent than I'll ever have in my little finger. So I'll leave it to Bleeding Cool, who wrote this about the first episode, the first issue, I should say, sorry. It's still the line work that drags us down to the depths. It is as if a scientist worked out how to enhance human DNA by adding feline elements that turn human nails into claws, dip them in ink, and said, hey, I've just got the Highlander license. Fancy having a go at drawing it? Even though you have never drawn a comic book before, and guess what? You're a human-cat hybrid and can be easily distracted by wool. I kind of feel like that sums it up for me. The interiors let it down in a huge way. They just, and I'm not saying this guy can't draw, but I think when you're talking about a level and a license, you know, yes, Highlander isn't Star Wars, you know, but a license that is as strong as Highlander is, and producing a comic book based on that, there is a level of professionalness that everyone will come to expect. You know, look at the artwork. You know, great artwork in the Dynamite series,
Yes.
and you know, and professional looking stuff. And yet here we have something that it wasn't me that said it, but there were many people who said it looked like it had been drawn by a child.
Right.
So, and what I find more frustrating, and Rob has given me permission to say this, is that the artist I mentioned earlier, who did some of the covers. Now, I ended up being friends with him on social media because, so there was this competition, right? When Highlander 3030 launched, that it was going to have the license, that it was going to do this stuff. That if you post or something on their page, whoever gets the most amount of likes will end up in the comic book. And I milked that. I probably lost friends on Facebook for this. I milked that for all it was worth. And it came down to me and this other guy, and literally we were tooth and nail. And we were like, both of us were like, this. I've got like a bunch of Facebook groups that I have for various projects and things. I went, all of them, I liked it with those groups just to get.
I hope I gave you a like for this. I don't remember, but I kind of remember it. But yeah.
Lots of people do. Lots of people were very, very nice to me, and probably, as I say, probably lots of people thought, "My God, shut up," and then just left. Anyway, and me and this guy, we jointly won, and we were gonna be in the comic, and this was for me. I'm going to be a part of Highlander. This is fantastic. On top of that, I'd done some illustration work just apropos of nothing, and just sent it to the guy there and said, "Look, you know, here's some stuff." He said, "Oh, this is, you know, yes, this is good." I said, "Look, can I do a variant cover?" And he said, "Yeah." So I did a variant cover for, I think, issue 3, maybe, something like that. Never saw the light of day because it never got past issue 1.
Yeah.
And, you know, what annoys me the most is that as I mentioned before, the artist Rob Norton, he had, having seen the original interiors, redrawn a lot of them of his own back. He hadn't been asked to. He hadn't been paid to do it. He loved Highlander and wanted it to be the best it could be. He had redrawn a lot of these interiors and had sent them to the guy at Emerald Comics, and he said, no, I'm sticking with what we've got. And this is after, I think, there was a preview copies that were sent out digitally before it went into print run, and it was getting
trashed. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And at that point, and he's saying, look, I'll redo the comic. No. The guy stuck by his guns for whatever reason he had, and decided, no, we're going to stick with what we've got, and they lost it.
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean, I agree. The interiors just looked, I mean, I'll say horrendous. Again, I don't mean anything bad towards the artist, but I would say that the artist that did the interior art is clearly not a comic book artist. And, I think having been a comic book reader for, I don't know, 40 years now, more. See, I'm old. There have, been various phases of comic book art throughout the years. Some, realistic, some that were just a bunch of like people trying to mimic Jim Lee and all this stuff. But even then there is, there's, I guess it goes to what do people think of as comic book art? A lot of people are just like, oh, it's just putting pictures on a page and then putting words over it. And it really, to be a successful and a really good comic book artist, you also have to be a storyteller, because to me, the most successful artwork in comics is, can I look through this without even reading the words and understand the story and get the meaning of the story?
Yeah.
I mean, that's bottom line. And if you can't do that with the art, then you're not a successful comic book artist. You may be a fantastic artist.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I applaud people that are bold enough to, put their artwork out there and go like, I'm going to do this. But I also hope that there are artists that are, even them themselves going, look, this isn't working. And, I'm not conveying this correctly. And, even I can tell that doesn't look like, Connor McLeod or Duncan McLeod, even an old one, that this doesn't look like a, whatever, but he's clearly not a comic book artist. I'm sure his art would be fine for something else.
Yeah.
Because art is that subjective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree with you that for something that is recognizable, I guess you would say, like a Highlander franchise or Stargate or Star Wars, you want the best you can do. Honestly, I mean, if you're going to bring in new people as well as appease the fans. I think the Dynamite comics did really well. You can tell that it does, it doesn't always look like Christopher Lambert, but you can tell that's Connor McLeod.
Yeah.
I mean, they established the look of Connor so that through the book you can tell it's him. And there are many times where it's like, yeah, wow, that looks like from the movie. Same thing with Duncan and stuff like that. You want to have that recognition if you're bringing back the franchise after X number of years of not being in comics. Yeah. So even like new people, if they look at it and they're like, oh, that TV show, oh, cool, yeah, I'll go watch that. So I just think the artwork failed on all of that. And the story, as far as the story, I'll tell you this. I mean, the reason why I kind of have this fondness for Highlander 2, the reason why I kind of have a fondness for parts of the source, and even Endgame, is they did something different and took a risk. I mean, the first movie is fantastic. That's kind of one of the reasons why I don't like the third movie. Is, to me, you're just replacing Kurgan with Kane, and you're essentially telling the same story.
Yeah.
and almost to some of the same beats.
Oh
And
yeah.
Final Battle even. And I'm like that. I don't want to see a series of movies that look and sound and feel exactly like the first one. Do something different with it. The
Yeah.
series kind of did something different with it,
Mm.
and the series introduced, you know, elements and progressed and evolved as it went. So the premise of you know, I always thought in the back of my head, it's like, what if Connor and Duncan lived to the year, you know, the time of Star Trek? Could they be on the Enterprise? You know, things like that. You know, kind of fanboy stuff. But the fact that the story was like, this is going to be in the year 3000. What would Connor be up to? And I was like, I would like to see that. That sounds great. Let's do that. So, you know, the story itself was something that hooked me, and something I'm like, yeah, I'll read that. And the promise from the covers of like, wow, this is going to look great. It's going to be good. And then it's like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was quite encouraged by it, and I mentioned Dark Knight Returns earlier, and I got a vibe of that in there. The aesthetics of the comic, on the covers that we'd seen, the
Yeah.
aesthetics of like the bad guys and just the way they looked, is kind of like punky kind of look,
Right.
futuristic. This idea of, you know, Duncan coming back, almost, you know, sort of back to the fore. There was seemed to be a sort of a female, young female lead character. It just kind of like felt a little bit like that. And I even did a little illustration that kind of mimicked the Dark Knight Returns kind of artwork, but with Duncan and this girl and stuff. And yeah, I like that vibe. And I thought, yeah, do you know what? It's different and interesting, and I'll give it a go. I certainly wasn't going to just, you know, write it off straight off the bat. So, you know, there you go. It's just one of those things. It's unfortunate the way that it worked out. You know, maybe I'll be in another comic book one day. If you're listening, anybody who takes over comic books again,
Yeah.
put both of us in, please, in the background.
I almost got my name in a comic, and the publisher asked the writer to change it because they thought it was a silly name. And Dilworth, they were like, yeah, that's a silly name. You got to change it to something else. And he graciously did so and apologized profusely to me. It was well, I'll tell you the story some other time. And in fact, it actually fits in with our guest, but I think that story doesn't get told. That'll get told another time. But yeah,
well,
no.
I was very lucky to recently be included in a comic book. I'm just gonna see if I can find, as if by magic, I have it here. The Battle of Britain special, right. Where the lovely Peter Briggs added me nice. On the panels, and now I can't find it. I'll flash it up on the screen. But yeah, bless his heart. He put me in there, and it just made my day, week, month, year, nice. To be immortalized. So thanks, Pete, for that. I'm still like super excited about that. So yeah, it's a nice thing to kind of be immortalized in that way. So you Absolutely. Will have your time, Joe. You will have your time.
Someday.
So our last entry into this, before we segue into our guest, was the American Dream, which was IDW taking on the reins and the license of Highlander. Now I get the impression that this, for whatever reason, wasn't massively well received. And I don't know all the reasons why not. For me, there were bits of it that I really liked. As I say, I really liked the Rachel stuff. I think for me that's kind of was a big plus about that series. Maybe the rest wasn't. I'm not so sure about the Civil War bad guy, and I kind of felt like he'd be played by Jake Busey if they turned it into a movie. That's kind of how I see him, a little bit cartoony maybe, and just. And there's the Kurgan again. What did you think about that one?
I mean, I thought it served what it was intended to be as a lead up to the first movie.
Yeah.
So I liked the idea, and again, it kind of did something a little different. I mean, we'd never seen, for the most part, in the movies, other than the one episode of the series where he teamed up with Duncan, we've not seen Connor team up with another immortal, really. I mean, it was obvious he was, Castigar, and that he was friendly with other ones, but I don't know. I thought it was a good story. Like I said, it was a neat intro. It gave an explanation of why the Kurgan was in New York City. So I agree that the flashbacks, though, were probably the weakest part of it. So yeah, no, I mean, yeah, much like you, there were bits of it that I thought worked well, some not so well. But again, I would have been interested in seeing some sort of continuation with IDW, whether they, went for after the movie, or the thing I've always wanted to see, a sequel on Zeist to the second movie, but in comics, so.
You never know. You never know. Unlikely, but you never know.
No. No, never. It'll never happen. Who knows, though? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Who knows?
The reboot will wipe that all away. So.
Yeah. There's got to be, in the reboot. I hope there's some little kind of just nod to Zeist somewhere.
Oh, that'd be even like a storefront that's like Zeist chairs or something like that. Or
yeah.
Well, and the Connor in the movie kind of does a double take to it and walks off. I mean, that would be great. But in Morangi, there can be only one. So.
Nice. Well, look, when it came to having a guest on, there really is only one person that we could have on. He's been at the forefront of the majority of Highlander's time in comic book form. So without further ado, Brandon Jerwa, thank you for joining us.
Where?
You.
Oh, yes. I forget sometimes.
Oh, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So when we decided we were going to do a comic book episode, there was really only one person that we had to speak to, which was yourself. You've been there for the most part of Highlander's sort of life in comic book form. I mean, it's the stories make for some interesting reading. But before we get to that, let me just find out, first of all, what was your first introduction to Highlander in general? And then also after that, how did you become involved in doing Highlander as a comic book?
My first exposure to Highlander was just Highlander. It was just the movie, and I'm a child of the '80s, and every movie with swords and sci-fi was an instant must-see, and Highlander was no exception. And then after that, I think I just took the same path as everybody else. I somehow watched the second movie and kept going. And then I moved on, the TV show and everything. And I never reached a point, and I've always tried to be honest about this. I was never like a crazy hardcore Highlander fan initially. I would watch the show when it was on, and I had seen all the movies and everything. But it wasn't my live and breathe thing. It was a thing I enjoyed in a category with many other similar things. So years go on, and I am a comic book writer. I've just made my break into the industry in 2003 writing G.I. Joe. And I had a nice, good run on G.I. Joe and was starting to feel like I may be able to get another gig. I mean, I was really just happy to just do G.I. Joe, and I thought, this is what I'm going to do. It'll be fine. And then I saw that Dynamite, the publisher, who ended up with the Highlander license, they had Battlestar Galactica based on the new show. And I contacted them and I said, I really want to do Battlestar Galactica. And they said, great, would you like to do Highlander instead? I said, I sure would. And then the next thing I knew, I was the writer on this series. And it was interesting. They wanted to get it going quickly in time for Free Comic Book Day.
Right.
0 issue. I'll never forget this. It was really one of those things that will stick with me forever. I was in LA. I was about to film an episode of a TV game show called I've Got a Secret, where my secret was I'd been made into a G.I. Joe figure.
Wow.
And the panel has to guess. It's a remake of an old game show. So I am there. I'm literally waiting for the people from the game show network to come and get me from my hotel. And I am on the phone with Dynamite. And I want to say Michael Avon Oming, who co-wrote the first arc with me, and definitely the publisher. And I hadn't met anyone from Davis Panzer, but I think maybe one of them may have been on the phone as well, but I don't remember. And we were trying to nail down just enough basic story concepts. I'd just gotten the gig. We were just trying to nail down story concepts enough that we could solicit some kind of information for this Free Comic Book Day issue and make the deadline. And then we'd have to go off and make that comic. And so we agreed. I think that, and Mike Oming is a wonderful creator. He's an amazing guy. He will tell you, and I follow his lead on this. He came up with a bunch of the sort of plot points of this first arc, and then kind of left me to script it, and really didn't get in my way at all. I would have been happy for him to get in my way, but he said, no, you got it, you go with it. So he helped come up with the story, and then I went off and scripted it. I think he brought in the Chernobyl concept, which I thought was an interesting tie. It timed out in the timeline, so that all worked for me. And then the next thing I knew, I was the regular writer, and Mike shuffled off to do other things because he's very famous and important. And then I was on this for 12 issues, I guess, and then ended up doing a Kurgan miniseries a few years later. But I was the guy, at least in terms of what Dynamite put out.
Yeah. Superb.
Well, you're obviously, as you said, started with G.I. Joe, so you're very well, at this point, writing Highlander, very well versed on how, tie-in properties work, especially ones that are controlled very fervently by a production company or outside company. So I'm sure you went through, all the hoops with G.I. Joe. How did you find, working on Highlander, how it went with Davis Panzer?
Davis Panzer was fine. I don't remember any real serious restrictions. Dynamite was very keen to, they sort of have a pattern, or at least had a pattern at that time, which was when they were launching a new property, at least this is my perception. I did a lot of licensed stuff for them. But they would sort of the starting point would always be that sort of timeless key conflict that you associate with a franchise, right? So that's why when we kicked this off, we are right after the first movie, and the Kurgan is present, even though the Kurgan is dead. And we say, we don't unkill the Kurgan, but his influence hangs heavy, and that's because to them, and I believe rightfully, the mass perception of this franchise that people think about if they're not super crazy fans is the Connor and the Kurgan. Just like I did a Battlestar Galactica series where there were not supposed to be any Cylons, and they were like, you need to figure out a way to put some Cylons in this. Got it. Okay. So you make your excuses and you write your story and you make it all work as best you can. So I didn't find much in the way of obstacles with this, at least in terms of the licenses. Learning the fan community was a completely different animal entirely. As it turns out, guys, everyone has opinions.
Oh, do they?
Really?
And they don't always agree.
Especially with you sometimes, yes.
Maybe a lot with me sometimes. And I brought on I found a fan who seemed to understand what I was saying. And I asked him to come in and be my sort of continuity guide, because it is it is a situation where I can learn all day, and I can take my own natural knowledge and I can take my skill as a storyteller. But when you have a fan base that is so dedicated and so divided in some cases, that, you know, I felt that I really wanted somebody to be perfectly honest, to check my work and just, you know, double gut check me, which was a huge crashing mistake for me as a writer. I no fault to Andrew, but to me, that was not something I should have done to myself. I should not have put the pressure on myself to bow to a fandom.
Right.
Don't worry, I didn't learn that lesson. I did it many times over on many franchises. But I did, I think, concern myself a little bit too much with that at times. And if the worst thing you do is make fans happy, oh no, what a terrible accomplishment you've come up with. But there were definitely times when I felt like I couldn't make a right move, right? Like if I did this, it would upset somebody else, or they would say, well, no, this doesn't fit. And I'm a continuity hound. Highlander's a tough continuity.
Oh,
You really have
Really?
to
Yeah.
decide in every moment, like, which part am I throwing out? Which part am I keeping? Which part am I winking at? You know? So that was tough. But I will say this about Highlander fans, they are divided, but having been in some real divided community situations with other franchises, they are by and large much nicer to each other. And there seems to be a lot less fighting in the streets, as it were. Rather, they seem to favor more polite disagreements for the most part. I don't know, maybe one of you guys have been stabbed. I haven't, but it does seem like a community that loves Highlander, and even though their opinions differ, they all seem to embrace one another.
yeah.
I don't know, just my perception.
No, I think you're right. I think for the most part that is the case. I think every now and then you get some you know, small amount of fighting going on that you have to kind of break up, but it doesn't happen all that often. Yeah, we often say it's one of those things where certainly when you get to the events, like, you know, live events like conventions and things like that, that it feels like a bit of a family at this point, because
Yes.
we've all been here for so long, and we're kind of, even when there's people that you don't know, you've met them online or whatever, you just, you know, and you generally get on, even if your, you know, opinions differ. So one of the things that I think, you talk about hurdles and things that you're going to suffer. I think one of the first hurdles you must have had to tackle when it came to doing a comic book series that takes place after Connor has killed the Kurgan is, well, what do you do then? Like, where, you know, he's the last one in the movie.
Right.
Where do you go from there? How did you find your way around that and come to the decisions that you came to in the end?
My approach, the way I've always explained it, is that the series, even though it starts with Connor, really takes place in the universe of the TV show.
Yeah.
Connor beat the Kurgan. He didn't win the prize.
Mm-hmm.
He thought he did, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And that's how Duncan shows up later, and Joe shows up later, and Mythos shows up later, and, you know, all those things. And they wanted, again, Connor and the Kurgan. I wanted to put, I knew very quickly after getting to know the franchise, you know, getting that sort of refresher and seeing where we left off from the last time I had been exposed to it, I realized, okay, Duncan is a thing we should definitely deal with. I wanted to put Duncan in the first arc, and they wouldn't. Connor Kurgan. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. So we did that. And then I tried to gracefully bring in Duncan and just sort of talk about, in the subtext, you know, Connor beating the Kurgan but not winning the prize. And that was sort of the operating premise we went under. And then I tried to fill in spaces, even did a time jump into the future after Endgame, little realizing how divisive Endgame would be as well. So I didn't hate Endgame. Is that wrong of me?
No, not at all. No, it's
okay.
I think it's generally considered to be, well, in my opinion, it appears to be considered to be the best sequel.
I think so.
Yeah. Admittedly, not a lot of competition in that category.
Not the worst sequel. That's the best competition. Not the worst sequel.
you didn't suck as bad as the other movies, so you know you're
Well,
okay.
well, let me ask you two a question, because I assume you've launched a Highlander podcast. I assume your fandom must go further back and more intense than mine started off being as a casual fan. Were comic books a thing you ever thought about? Like, was this a thing when Dynamite said it, you were like, finally, or were you like, oh, good idea?
Yeah, I don't know that it would be a finally. I think it was nice to hear. It was nice to hear that something else was happening with Highlander. And I think that just generally tends to be what happens with the fandom as it is at the moment, because things come out so infrequently that the minute something happens, it's like, more Highlander at last. It's been a long time, So there was that. But would I have necessarily imagined it as a comic book? I suppose not. It probably didn't spring to mind. How about you, Jay?
Yeah, no, actually, I was like, yeah, this should be a comic book if they're not going to continue it, faithfully or decently in film or TV, or now that the series is over. Only because, being a comic book fan for as long as I can remember, I was very familiar with tie-in comics and things like that. I think what intrigued me about Highlander was it wasn't just, I mean, for the most part, when you did a tie-in comic, even if you did something with a property that was well done long ago, it was still confined to within whatever movie, or before that movie, there was rarely a comic book continuation. I mean, we see that a lot now, not just with Netflix reviving shows, but comic books continuing a series. I think Jericho and some other series did that. But when Highlander came out, it was rare that it was new stories that went past what we knew at that point. So seeing a continuation, a follow-up in the comics of the first movie was great. Watching it morph into, taking place during the TV series, and then after Endgame, which was the latest movie at the time, was like, wow, this is definitely something unique and different. It isn't just, here's what Luke did between scenes in the Star Wars movie for 12 issues and stuff like that, even though I guess Star Wars, they got to do what happened afterwards, knowing there was a sequel, but even then they were confined, wasn't anything important that could happen in those. So it was just not being like, a retelling of the movie or something like that, or what happened between seasons of a TV show, having it be something that kind of mattered and furthered the story was quite good. Yeah. And I'm not saying this because Brandon wrote it. This is before I met Brandon.
If I could, you mentioned these conventions, and I have to say that, like, I've written a lot of comics, and I've worked on video games, and I've done these things, and I've been very lucky to go to a lot of conventions and be a guest of honor at things, and that kind of stuff. But I have been to 2 Highlander worldwide conventions as a guest, and Vancouver and LA. And I have never in my life been treated better. I have never been more welcomed by a group of people who are a million times more famous and beloved than I could ever conceive of being. And never been more warmly received as the guy making the new thing that goes with all the other stuff you like about your big franchise, right? And I'll tell you, that first convention, I totally just Larry Davided my way through the whole thing. Every moment was a Curb Your Enthusiasm screw up of some kind, culminating in there was a big show. There was a big show in this lovely hotel in Vancouver, and James was up and he was going to do music, and there was a banquet and all this wonderful stuff. And I was there with my family, and I had kind of an insistent person with me at the time, and this person insisted that we sit in these particular seats. We happened to show up first to everything, and we sat in these particular seats. And of course, those were the seats for the guests of honor. And we just popped down like we belonged there. We just were trying to fill seats in the front. I mean, like, it was couldn't have been more innocent. And of course, here comes Adrian and and Peter and Elizabeth and David and all this royalty, and they just kind of look at us, and they couldn't have been nicer, and they just moved things so we all sat at this table that we did not belong at all. And it was great. I got to meet Rich Ridings, and I got to see him and his daughter Freya, who is now a massive international superstar.
Oh yeah.
Sing on a stage, do a dad and daughter act. She's the sweetest kid I've ever met in my entire life. They're a ridiculously talented family. It's absurd.
Yeah.
He is the sweetest man that walks the face of the earth.
100%.
And then, so the next year or 2 years later, I don't know. I'm at Los Angeles, and I'm having a great time. I got to go to the Jimmy Kimmel show and see Depeche Mode, my favorite band in the world. I'm having just the best time in LA. I'm by myself. I am really trying to not Larry David my way through this convention. So I'm just trying to stay away from everybody. And I am sitting at the hotel restaurant the day that the show is ending. And I'm sat there having my breakfast, and I'm by myself, and I feel a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Peter Wingfield. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, what do you mean? What am I doing? I'm having breakfast. He goes, "Not alone." And he literally led me over to a table where he and Adrian and Elizabeth, everybody's there, and they all go, "Oh, Brandon!" And I get to sit down, and I had my last breakfast with them, and I just am chewing my leg off the whole time. I'm like, I don't belong with you people. And they were incredibly gracious and incredibly kind, and it was so sincere. Like, they were literally sat in a place where I wouldn't have seen them. They didn't have to let me know they were there. Yeah. And Peter went out of his way to come and get me, and I just, man, he's all right, that guy.
Oh yeah.
No, also found myself getting lost in his eyes a couple of times. It happened.
We've all been there. We've all been.
Yeah.
My wallet, you say, whatever you'd like, Peter.
He is a lovely guy, but they're all lovely. This is it, and this is the crazy thing. And the lovely thing about the convention that we had 3 years ago, which was kind of the 25th anniversary of the series kind of theme, was that it didn't feel like you were at a convention where you were the fans and they were the guests. It felt like a convention where everybody was just enjoying, remembering it and going over it again and talking about it and there's that real kind of nice kind of mesh of the two, which was I don't know that you necessarily would find that in other fandoms. So yeah,
you don't. I'm not saying it's not out there in pockets, but I just had never seen it writ large like that. Really, just everyone here is amazing and wonderful, without exception, and that was great. I had a young woman come up to my table in Vancouver, and she bought every book I had. And I said, "Wow, that's a lot of confidence. Have you read this yet?" He goes, "Well, I've read them all, but I live in a country," I want to say she lived in Croatia, where at the time she couldn't get the books. And so she pirated them.
Oh, right. Okay.
Fully she came loaded with cash, fully willing to make good on the money she didn't spend. And I just what? You could have just walked up and said, "I read all your books, didn't pay a penny for them," and just moved on, and I would have felt great. But that's the kind of integrity and love of Highlander that I saw, and it was kind of amazing.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. That's really nice to hear. I'm pleased about that. So I think maybe would I be right in saying the pinnacle of your time writing Highlander as comic book form would be the Kurgan two-parter, because that's the one I hear spoken about the most, and at least spoken about in the most kind of lauded sense of, "Oh, do you remember that great kind of Kurgan two-parter?" And I think where it comes to Highlander and their sort of what they kind of promote and things like that, Kurgan is the top of the list. I think because he's so iconic, and so it made sense that they would do that. Were you pleased when they approached you? Did they approach you with the idea? Did you approach them? How did that kind of come about?
They came to I'm pretty sure they came to me. And I will admit, after the series, and taking the approach we did, I'm pretty sure I probably did, and at least in my head, kind of roll my eyes, like, really, the Kurgan again? Okay, we're gonna do the Kurgan. But then I got into it, and I really I did a lot of research about the Russian steppes, and I tried to figure out logically where he would have been and what we know from the lore, and also the novel. There's stuff in the novelization about the Kurgan that
Yeah.
was not visible elsewhere, and so I took that. And again, that may have been Andrew Modine who sent me that. I don't want to take credit for sorting it out on my own, but yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it I don't want to say that it kind of wrote itself, but it was easy to write in the sense that you have such this wide open palette, and this guy who only wants one thing. Like, he's not interested in a lot of side trips and other objectives. The one thing on his mind, and that is getting all he can out of the world. And yeah, I really great. And I have never really known how people felt about that book, to be perfectly honest. So it's really nice to hear that people speak well of it. Yeah.
No, I think so. I mean, from what I've heard, I would say so. And I picked up about on one of the things that you say about taking sort of material from the novelization, but I love the way that it was used. The moment of Kurgan with the prostitute, effectively, uses that unused Candy moment where she had scars and things like that. Yeah, I think that was the case. And then you kind of remolded that into a sort of a moment that happened in the past. And the minute I read it, I was like, I know where that's from. But lovely attention to detail.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, really cool, very nicely done.
No, I like that, especially the Kurgan, but definitely the attention to detail in the last arc in the main series with, Duncan after Endgame. I mean, you seamlessly kind of brought in the Watchers mythos, and it didn't feel forced, but it was like it was kind of one of those things that if you were a fan of the series already, you were like, oh yeah, I know what that's about. I mean, that kind of same thing with in the first arc, the Dark Quickening. I mean, that was not a thing in the movies; it was from the series, and it's like, well, that would totally make sense if Connor took the Kurgan that, as we've seen from the grand two-part miniseries, that he is, fairly evil. So you can't expect that to be a normal quickening. So yeah, no, that was, those kind of details, fantastic.
Oh, well, thanks a lot. I will admit this to anybody watching this. I had to go back and reread my Highlander books. In fact, I even asked Joe if we could stave this off a week initially, because it's been a long time, and early 2000s, I think. And so I went back and I read it, and I there was a lot of stuff I had straight up forgotten, I won't lie. But I did find that I put a pretty good through line in there with like quickening and sort of turning Connor into a Force ghost at the end and all that kind of stuff. But I thought it's thanks for the compliment on the third arc. I thought the third arc, when I read it this time, I was like, wow, there's so much going on in this one. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I'm making two movies here, and they seem to agree, but there's a lot happening. For me, in going back and rereading this, I was the happiest with the second arc, where Connor is, Dark Quickening and all of that. To me, that was the one time in this, because I tried to make a Highlander movie. I tried to make a sequel to Highlander 1, a real nice story arc of the Highlander TV show, and then another Highlander movie that followed Endgame. Like, that was sort of what I was going with. And I felt the second part, like, it is the quieter of the three, I suppose. I sounded like I was about to start crying, just hiccuping. The quieter of the three.
So good.
It's the quieter of the three stories, and I would have liked to have done more of that had we had more time. Like the big crazy action stuff with prophets and things blowing up and forced gatherings and all that. Great, but yeah, for me it was the quiet stuff. And why were people mad at me for bringing in Hugh when I did? I don't remember. Is it because he mentioned the Watchers, I think, and they were like, no, 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 it's not the right time. I want to defend that I wrote that in such a way that it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody knows what he's talking about. That's
right.
That's all. I just like to say that. In case that is the correct argument after all these years.
In retrospect, looking back at it now, is there anything that you wish that you had have done or done differently?
Used fewer words. I was looking through these books, and I used to really be proud of the fact I got a review one time, and Joe will tell you, if I get one compliment in a review, I think I've changed comics forever.
Yes, it's true.
Hey, settle down. I got this review once that said, I love Brandon Jerwa's books because they take twice as long to read as most comics. And I was like, yeah, they do. And I'm reading through this, and this is like verbose Sword Fights the musical. This is just like, why would I use one word when 50 will do?
Yes.
And you can tell that I figured it out at some point because there's a 3-page sequence that's a sword fight with very little dialogue. And I'm like, I think I'm talking too much. But I did show that I knew every word, and I'm very proud of that.
See, you used all of the words. It's great.
Oh, yeah, there's none left. Yeah. So no, I would have I probably would have actually maybe done a little more focused storytelling. I didn't want to slip into that thing of just making an episode of the TV show, right? Which is great and was very successful based on that formula. But I don't know that you want to read a comic where an angry immortal from Duncan's past shows up and has a score to settle. Like that's not good comics. And it's not. I didn't think it was making good use of the format where we can get away with anything.
Yeah.
We want to blow things up, budget not a concern. We want 50 immortals, budget not a concern, So I tried to go large, and there are times when I think I would have rather have gone quieter. But overall, I'm having literally just reread it all. I'm pretty happy, all things considered.
Oh, that's really cool. And have you followed what's happened since with the Highlander comics at all?
No, I really haven't, and no disrespect to anybody. I was actually not even aware of them until fairly recently. I don't know who published. I really don't, and I'm so sorry to the people making comics. You deserve more attention than that, but I just have not been in a space of awareness.
Yeah, no. Well, they've been few and far between. It's only really been sort of picked up twice since your run. Once incredibly unsuccessfully. By an outfit called Emerald Comics.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, who tried to go to the future with Highlander 3030.
Oh, that also sounds familiar. Maybe I have a passing awareness of that or heard of it.
Yeah.
That didn't work out?
It didn't, no, largely because the artwork was, and no disrespect to the artist involved, I feel I have to say that as a disclaimer, but the artwork was not so good, and really didn't give it much of a. It was too poor to be able to manage to get through.
I understand. I can't say I'm not unfamiliar with that.
Yeah, it was the one thing that everybody mentioned, and so therefore it killed it dead. It never made it past the first. I want to say maybe it made 2 issues, but I'm not.
No, it was just the one, unfortunately.
Just the one.
Oh wow, that's
okay. Which was a shame. But and then there was one more recently, which was the American Dream, which was a sort of a little kind of mini series of Connor, sort of in the. I want to say, what time period was it, Joe? You're probably better at this.
Flashbacked a few times, but it was basically a lead up to the first movie.
Yeah.
Took place just before the first movie.
Okay.
So
did that same company end up with Stargate? Is that the same?
It was IDW that did the American Dream. I don't remember if they got Stargate.
Okay. I was thinking it's something else, I guess. Well, that's very interesting. I in terms of everything else with Highlander, I did, and I assume everybody did. I read a movie script at one point, several years ago. Joe, did I get that from you?
You might have.
Where they
I
were like
mean,
shooting each
I
other.
don't know who sent that to you.
Right. No, it was a script where they would like shoot each other and slow each other down and kind of mess with each other a lot before killing each other.
Oh yeah, that was a weird one. That's about
It,
all I remember from it. But
there were
yeah,
things I liked about it, but it was very strange.
yeah.
I do have a secret Highlander movie treatment. In case anybody ever asked me to reboot the first movie, I do have notes for that. I don't know. Like, what do you think is the future of Highlander? Like, because to me, and I don't like saying this, and somebody's going to get mad, I'm sure. I think the best way to save Highlander right now is to completely start over. I think it's kind of written itself into a corner, and it can't get out in a way that will bring in a new audience. There's nothing wrong with what's been done.
No.
I can't see it getting a new audience unless it starts anew. Am I crazy?
No, absolutely not.
No.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. And I think that's one of the things that people, one thing you tend to find on the group when this sort of comes up is that, like as you said, there's a divided camp. One half, or I won't say it's a half necessarily, but the one side is, no, we love this. You need to have Duncan in it. It's got to have, Adrian Paul needs to be in it, which is one point of view. And the other point of view is, as you said, no, this needs to start anew. And I think, like you said as well, you don't have to feel like you are jettisoning everything that's gone before into the void and never to be seen again. It exists as it exists. The movie is a classic in and of itself. I mean, they're all disparate anyway. None of them are really fully connected to each other. The series is its own thing. All of these things exist and are wonderful testaments to the time, to themselves, and things like that. And 100%. A reboot is absolutely fine. And in some ways, you could even kind of say that maybe it's connected, like, maybe it wasn't a gathering, and maybe, but, for the most part, yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% behind the reboot, and I always have been, because, and my kids will attest to this, my older two who've seen the original one, it's very 80s, which is a great thing. It looks fantastic, and it is of its time, but it's dated for that reason. So you lose your current generation audience, probably because of that. Doing it now especially if Chad Stahelski does it with John Wick, that is going to be an amazing reintroduction to a new generation and more generations afterwards of this amazing story, of this wonderful thing that's kept us buoyant all this time. So yeah, long story short, I think it's a great idea.
Well, my Highlander reboot treatment starts with the end of the 100-year truce, and that's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
It will never happen.
We did one of our earlier episodes was us discussing each what our reboot pitch would be. So that was pretty interesting. I think we all, except for Grant, because there's three of us at the time, and I think Rob and I both came up with the idea of, I know it sounds trite and everybody does it nowadays, but I would totally do a gender swap and my idea was in the flashback with Connor being banished from his village. We don't see initially why he was banished, and he ends up with Heather, and when the Kurgan shows up, he kills them both and waits for one of them to resurrect, and it's Heather instead of Connor. He wasn't banished because he was immortal. Turns out she's immortal, and so she would be the one that would be the McLeod that would go through time. But it'll never happen. Nobody will listen to me.
Yeah.
So.
I think it would have been a possibility were it not for the old guard with Charlize Theron, because I think that has placed a female immortal right in the mainstream, and that's kind of put pay to that. But
see, wouldn't that be funny if they did that did a Highlander movie with a female lead and they got accused of ripping off old guard? Or it's like, really? Because
wait a second, yeah.
That would be pretty funny. Well, so
And
you know,
then they
Brandon,
fight.
yeah, exactly. So, Brandon, one of the other things that we've, I won't say pride ourselves, but one of the things we like to do on the show is delve into the what ifs, the cut scenes, the things that we didn't see. So, you know, I know comics obviously is a different medium than movies, but I think, you know, both of us probably have notebooks filled with unpublished versions of stories and things like that. So was there anything, you know, for lack of a better term, wound up on the cutting room floor, or things you had planned going forward that we didn't get to see?
There were two things, one of which was not even supposed to involve me, and I ended up involved for what it ended up being, which was nothing. But first off, I repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, pitched Highlander versus Dracula. And the idea being that they had met several times.
Mhm.
I know that would have infuriated many people, but I wanted to have an immortal grudge match between Duncan or Connor and Dracula. So there's that.
No.
Second is wackier, and I think we're okay after all these years to probably just talk about it. There was a notion flying around that went to my friend Eric Troutman, who I wrote a lot of books with. Joe, you know Eric very well. And I don't know if it was a discussion, and I like, it was Terminator versus Highlander.
Nice.
And there was discussion, like it never got anywhere, so don't ever think this went into development or anything. If it did, I don't know about it, and I'm not being coy. But yeah, there was a discussion about Terminator versus Highlander, and I sat down with Eric. He came to me and was like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "Well, I think we all know what we think about it. Like this will never happen." But yeah, no, I came up with something, or we came up with something where the Terminators figure out a way to hold on to your asses. They found a way to absorb quickening energy in such a way that they could extrapolate data from it.
Okay.
Okay, it makes sense. I mean,
go back and kill immortals. It's really stupid. And now that I'm saying it out loud,
No.
Yeah.
But I would read that.
Like an ether binge. I'm just so the robots get the guys and their memories. You know how robots work.
Yeah.
But there was something in that concept of figuring out they needed to kill the immortals because they're immortal. I mean, because they're immortal, and they wanted to erase all memory of life on Earth. It's nonsense. So anyway, lots of fun ideas in comics, you guys. So many fun ideas.
Cool.
Never go. But other than that, there's not much on the cutting room floor, sadly. What you see is what you get. But yeah, man, I really wanted to do Highlander versus Dracula.
Was there thoughts at the time? I mean, you did 12 issues, but were there 13, I guess, with the 0 issues plus the Kurgan one. But since the Kurgan one was titled Highlander Origins, was there any thought to doing more of those, or even continuing the main series?
I don't think the main series. I don't think we ever really came back around to that. I did suggest that if the Kurgan went well, maybe we could do the Four Horsemen.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a way to go. It seemed like the obvious way to go for me, especially if the Kurgan had hit. The Kurgan clearly didn't do good enough numbers to warrant that, but that would have been fun.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, of course, that ended up being done as a audio drama.
Yes.
I don't know if you are aware of, but yeah.
Yeah, I am aware of that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got there in the end.
Yes. So yeah, no, that's it. No big secrets that I can remember. Joe, if I told you something at the time, which is totally a thing that could have happened, that I'm forgetting, by all means prompt me, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't really remember. I mean, I've heard at Mongolian Grill and other places many stories from you and Eric over the years, and I don't remember any of the Highlander ones, but yeah, no, it was. But yeah, the comics are great. Like I said, that's why I hauled my collection of them to you to get signed at that first con. But yeah, really well done. I mean, I guess my biggest disappointment was that it didn't continue. Um, but maybe there weren't enough of us Highlander fans out there to keep it going.
Well, you all showed up. I will say that the numbers were very consistent, which tells me that the audience who liked it stuck with it. It just wasn't
Right.
enough audience. I also learned, and I told Joe this before the show, people think that comic book writers just have a big warehouse where I just have countless copies of my books. I don't. My comic book collection was stolen a few years ago, and they got all my selling copies as well. So I actually had to go buy my own damn books to research for this podcast, which I did. My back issues are expensive, y'all. This is 3 volumes right here. This is nearly $100 worth of books.
Wow, nice.
This one's a hardcover, very nice, suitable for framing. Yeah, these trade paperbacks and 2 of these are used and kind of used a lot, if I'm being honest. I know these were read, maybe in anger. I'm not sure. But, yeah, no, it's good. I'll send you.
I'm just imagining whoever owned them just getting it ready to the post and to Brandon.
Yeah. Wait a sec.
You hope, right? You hope.
So what have you been up to since your time at Highlander? What are you doing now? Like, what's going on?
I kind of took a turn out of comics and went to games, and now nobody knows what the hell I do anymore. And that's fine. So let's see. I have spent the last few years working in games. I was pulled kicking and screaming into video games. I'm not a big video game player, or I wasn't at the time, and I kept saying, no, I'm not the right guy to write video games. And all my friends were like, no, you'll figure it out. Also, they pay money. You might like money. Comics, they don't. And so I did a couple of video games, and it went pretty well. And then I ended up becoming the lead writer on the Britney Spears mobile game, and found that I'm really, really good at writing choice-based games targeted at women and gay men. And then I took that and ended up working at NBC Universal as the story editor for a choice-based game aimed at women and gay men, featuring a huge array of IPs like The Breakfast Club and Law and Order and Xena and Bridesmaids, and I had a huge 30-plus team of writers. Like it really, I found my calling in that, and then I got laid off, moved back to Seattle right before the pandemic. I work for Funko now.
Wow.
Funko, the big-headed toys?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at a Funko package now, and there's text on it, I either wrote, edited, or proofread all of that text. I do a lot of marketing text. I'm working on secret things, other toys and stuff where I have a more conceptual hand. I've also in this last year done some more video games. I freelance. I'm allowed to freelance, which is great. I've been doing some stuff with Amazon, creating Alexa experiences that have been very cool. I haven't done comics in a while. Would happily go back to comics, but I really have kind of found this path in gaming, and I'm pretty happy with it. Also, Joe might not know this, but this concerns him. Many years ago, I performed the greatest disaster of my career and crowdfunded a documentary that took many, many years to finish and shouldn't, but it's done.
No way.
I am right now waiting on the sound and color correction, and then it is literally done. The Blu-ray pressing facility is waiting for the files. Everything is actually for real 100% done.
Wow.
And yes, your name is in the credits because you interviewed some of the people for this documentary.
Yeah,
But
wow. Okay.
it took way too long. I had a divorce. I lost my mind and lost control of a big project that a lot of people put a lot of faith in. And finally now I've gotten it together and we are rewarding.
Awesome.
So
that's great. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, so briefly, what is the documentary about?
it's called Untold Tales of the Comic Industry. And I and others, Joe included, but I traveled around. I went to San Diego, went to Portland, went to Seattle, went to the UK, England, and Scotland. Filmed in Algeria, but the footage literally did not survive being shipped back to the US, or it got erased along the way by the government. We're not sure. But none of our footage survived from Algeria, but we had dozens and dozens, I think over 100 hours of footage of interviews, comic creators ranging from people you've never heard of to Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Miller and Frank Quitely. And so it's all interviews, and it's just a sort of love letter to the comic industry that I felt very lucky to be a part of. And yeah, that's it. So we are, literally days away from going to press now as we talk about this. And it's been a long, hard, embarrassing, and disappointing road. And I'm glad that it's going to be in the rear view. But the only way to ever solve it was to, follow through and finish the damn thing. So it took a long time, but it's done.
That's awesome. I'm very excited to see that.
Oh, well, look, thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on. And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It really has. Thank you. Now, we always do something at the end of the show, which I realize now that I haven't primed you about at all.
Oh, good.
I don't know how this is going to go.
You get to act.
Is this like Joe's last show? Is this a kiss off? Because I'm not doing that. Hi, this is Brandon Jerwa on Highlander Heart. Hold fast and don't lose your head.
So you working at Funko, does that increase the chances of Highlander pops?
No.
I mean, next year is the 35th anniversary.
They don't listen to me. Maybe down the road, maybe I'll have a little more pull when it comes to making pops. But it is always good to tell them when you want a thing, because they do listen.